This is Senior Master Coordinator Bob Ferguson, and tonight we're going to talk about Vivix, which is a unique compound that Shaklee has that slows aging at the cellular level. We all know aging when we see it. We can see it in our face, we can see it in our bodies, but you know what? Aging actually starts with our cells. Stress, poor diet, environmental toxins can wreak havoc on our cells every day. And the more the cells are bombarded, the more vulnerable they are. And you know, it's interesting, in the early 80s, Jeff Bloomberg from Tufts, who was on our scientific advisory board, was speaking to us in Washington, D.C. And he said, folks, it's all about genetic integrity. Each one of your strands of DNA are hit 1 million times a day with oxidative species, compounds that our body actually creates itself. And then all the other environmental toxins that come in and stressors in the body, poor diet and all that. But even if we have a perfect diet, when we eat a meal, we create a cascade of free radicals that can damage our cells. So what Jeff said is that our cellular integrity, and therefore our life, is a balance between the life-giving aspects of oxygen and the life-destroying aspects of oxygen. So it really takes a very proper nutritional state, exercise, sleep, all the elements that allow our body to operate naturally so that we can experience that damage and we repair the damage. So I thought that really stuck in my mind all these years. So did you know that a study estimates that Americans on the average consume 3 hamburgers and 4 orders of French fries every week? I don't know who does that, but apparently a lot of people. And studies show that foods high in fat increase biological stress response markers, which over time can contribute to cellular aging. Also, did you know that as we age, the number and function of mitochondria, you probably remember that from 10th grade biology, the cellular power plants in our cells, but the number and the function, the actual health of the mitochondria decline over time, which reduces cellular energy. And every day, every cell in your body, as I mentioned, is assaulted by 1 million free radical attacks that can damage the cell's DNA. And that's not stuff just coming from the outside. It's stuff that actually is a function of our own metabolism and digestion. And the last thing is excess accumulation of advanced glycation end products, AGE, can cause cellular damage that can compromise cell longevity. So advanced glycation end products are apparently sugars and proteins that cross-link and create this kind of glop in your cell. And as one of our scientists explained it, it's an accumulation of plaque in the cell. He said, kind of like if you have a house and you have 1 bag of garbage in the house, then you can still live in the house. But if you have 10,000 bags of garbage in the house, you can't live in the house. And that's how these advanced glycation end products build up and build up and build up. And apparently if they build up enough, they make the cell dimmer, as this person said. And then the cell dies, and then it releases all kinds of not so good stuff. So we really want to be as vigilant as we possibly can to eat and to behave in such a way that we reduce these AGE products. And so we finally have a way to slow aging at the cellular level. This is not an antioxidant product, although there's many antioxidants in the product. It's actually a genetic regulator that we'll see in a moment. So we're going to slow aging at the cellular level. And only Vivix contains both resveratrol and a proprietary polynutrient blend. And this polynutrient blend harnesses the powerful antioxidant properties of a rare MUSCADINE grapes. It has been shown again to be 10 times more powerful than resveratrol alone in slowing a key mechanism of cellular aging. Now, Dr. Sinclair at Harvard made resveratrol very famous. I think Vivix came out in 2008. This was in the early part of this century. He showed that resveratrol can mimic things like if you give monkeys only half of the calories that a monkey generally eats, the monkey will live a lot longer. But as someone said, who would want to live that long if you're only eating half of what you normally eat? But what he found is that he could get similar impacts in monkeys by just feeding them resveratrol. But as it turns out, resveratrol alone isn't nearly as powerful as these phytonutrients. Actually, Dr. Daggy, who was the lead scientist at Shaklee for quite a number of years, gave me a slide deck, but he basically showed that a bunch of very, very important mechanisms in the body. if you saw the resveratrol, the level of resveratrol activity on that particular function was here. And the level of polyphenol activity was here. But if you add the polyphenols and the resveratrol together, the activity was way up here. So in a typical fashion, Shaklee could have just seen what was happening in the marketplace, and other companies were trying to put out a resveratrol product, but they waited and did the research and did the thinking through, and they came up with a product which is absolutely revolutionary. And no one else can have that because a key ingredient is muscadine grape, and we have commercial production of muscadine grape locked up for many, many decades. So there you have it. And so here we go about muscadine grapes. They're one of nature's rarest grapes with a unique polyphenol profile that offers a number of health benefits. It's interesting that muscadine grape has one more chromosome, and that apparently codes for a whole bunch of these really, really amazing polyphenols. And the muscadine grape is the only grape that is native to the US. And as Dr. Daggy pointed out in his beautiful talk, plants protect us, not because plants think a lot about human beings, but plants protect themselves. And if we eat the plants, then we get the protection that the plant has created for themselves. They said one of the reasons why the muscadine grape is such an amazing species is that it lives in very swampy, hot Southeast United States, filled with molds and all kinds of pathogens that could actually attack the plant. So this plant, as all healthy plants do, create chemicals inside the plant that tend to ward off the enemies, protect the plant. And so since we can't create those in our body, we have to eat the plant in order to get those values. That's why a varied diet of fruits and vegetables is so incredibly important, because those fruits and vegetables spent some really good time over evolutionary biology, creating the capacity to protect themselves. And we get that protection if we eat them. Now, a point, if we eat commercially grown fruits and vegetables that have been, if not genetically modified, at least bred for taste and for other things, but not necessarily nutrition, we may not be getting all of the benefits from that fruit and vegetable that we might have. In fact, there's absolutely great evidence that we don't. Okay, so one of the powerful results that Vivix gives us, it slows aging at the cellular level, again, from a genetic regulation standpoint, by improving cell defense, increasing cell energy, promoting cell repair, and optimizing cell performance. So let's take a look at this. This was done, I believe, I think this was SUNY Buffalo that did this study. Now, this is really an extraordinary thing. When you think of inflammation, inflammation can be a good thing, right? You cut yourself, your flesh gets inflamed, and that's part of the healing response. But if we don't have a proper diet, we can have a generalized inflammatory response. And that generalized inflammation across our body apparently is the bed of so many, many, many diseases. That inflammatory response can be triggered by diet. So this was a study, Dr. Dodona, I believe, was doing studies on the biological stress response, which is our way of saying inflammation. Shaklee has some very definite restrictions in terms of what they can talk about or how we can describe things. So inflammation is a disease state, so we call inflammation biological stress response, but that's what it is, it's inflammation. So what this study involved subjects, college students, eating a high-fat and therefore very stressful to the body meal, some kind of a breakfast thing with a lot of calories, a lot of fat, a lot of salt and all that. So they took these subjects and they fed them a high-fat meal. And then they watched the inflammatory response. Now you see this blue line, that's the control. And the control subjects ate the meal and the inflammation took off in their body and stayed high. That timeline on the bottom is 5 hours. So 5 hours after they ate that meal, the inflammatory response was still extreme in their body. Now, experimental subjects took 1 teaspoon of Vivix along with that high-fat meal. And the line in the bottom is the inflammatory response. It was almost completely blunted. So this is really a big deal. I mean, I could stop right there and we would have all the reason in the world to use Vivix. But as I say, there's more. So cellular energy. So in a laboratory study, Vivix key ingredients were shown to increase energy production at the cellular level. So in the control group, this was muscle cells, and the mitochondria were stained the blue color. And so this was just a little petri dish of muscle cells. The second one was muscle cells that were bathed in resveratrol, and the third were muscle cells bathed in the Vivix, which is the polyphenol resveratrol blend. And you can see the extraordinary increase in mitochondrial mass. Now, again, I'm not a scientist. I'm just kind of reporting in what I have heard and what these slides show. So I can't tell you the mechanism by which this happens. But what does happen, practically speaking, is that apparently Vivix helps mitochondria that are not doing so well to repair themselves, and it induces mitochondrial biogenesis, which means more mitochondria are created. And since the mitochondria are cellular furnace, that's where the energy is converted in our cells that drives our entire body. So that's, again, that would be enough of a reason to use Vivix. Cellular repair. So this was a study that showed that Vivix key ingredients protect and repair cellular DNA. In other words, it protects DNA from damage, from free radical damage, and it allows the DNA to repair itself more effectively. A good reason all by itself. This was the advanced glycation end products. And what was shown, there's a certain blunting off of the production of advanced glycation end products, but with Vivix, it was dramatically more. So again, if you don't want glop accumulated in your cells, this is a really great product. So this is a study that was shared to me by Dr. Daggy. And this is the synergistic effects of phenolic mixtures in human cell models of aging. So this is what they actually did. They had human pancreatic cells in a petri dish, and they were exposed to a control or resveratrol or Vivix active ingredients. The cells in one instance were exposed to a placebo control substance. The second petri dish was resveratrol. The third petri dish, Vivix active ingredients. So basically it was kind of marinated in that. Then the treatment was washed away. And then the cells were challenged by oxidative stress for 5 minutes. And then the DNA damage was imaged and measured. So let's look at what happened. This was all that was left of the DNA, that little bright spot on the left, slightly bright spot, and you have this big, huge debris field of DNA that had basically been blown up, had been destroyed. So let's look at the resveratrol petri dish. Well, much better. Still a big, huge debris field, but there was more of the nucleus, the more of the genetic material survived. Are you ready for this? This is Vivix. Isn't that amazing? So that's a really pretty big deal. So there it is, control, resveratrol, and Vivix. So on to another really, really fascinating study. And we can thank Dr. Daggy for this, because this was actually presented at a big eye conference in the Boston area. When Dr. Daggy was at Shaklee, he heard of an optometrist and an ophthalmologist who independently had bumped into Shaklee and bumped into Vivix and put 2 and 2 together. And they were using Vivix for their patients with dry, age-related macular degeneration. So I'm just going to read this. So age-related macular degeneration, AMD, is a leading cause of blindness worldwide with limited pharmaceutical and surgical treatment options. In the United States, more than 50% of all blindness is caused by AMD. AMD is characterized by damage to the macula, a region of the retina. The etiology of AMD is largely unclear, but is associated with aging and other risk factors, including genetics, hypertension, cardiovascular disease, obesity, and smoking. So nutrient-based preventative treatments for AMD have been evaluated in age-related eye disease study, AREDS and AREDS2. AREDS2 formulation has been shown, which is zinc and vitamin A and a number of nutrients, comprises the AREDS formulation, which has been shown to significantly reduce the risk of developing advanced AMD. Case studies indicate that remission of AMD, though rare, does occur spontaneously. In this regard, retinal regeneration is possible. So it's possible, but I understand from Dr. Daggy and others that it's virtually unknown, that once a person has macular degeneration, the most that the AREDS or AREDS 2 formulation can do, the most that's been documented, is it slows the progression of AMD. But I believe that there has been never, that before this study, there was never any indication that you could actually reverse macular degeneration. So the purpose of the current study was to investigate the effects of combining AREDS 2 treatment with the resveratrol polyphenol-enriched supplements, the RPS, on macular structures and visual function in dry AMD patients. I'm going to read one of these little tiny ones because this is pretty amazing. This is the second graph at the bottom, figure 2. Case 2 is an 83-year-old female in good general health who has had dry macular degeneration in form of soft drusen, which are little lesions on the eye, in both eyes for about 5 years, and who has taken her AREDS formula faithfully for 5 years. So her baseline was she was taking this AREDS formula for 5 years and experiencing this damage in her eyes. After 9 months of taking 5 milliliters, teaspoon, of RPS, the Vivix formulation, per day, in addition to the AREDS formulation, she showed improved vision as measured in the Snellen acuity of 2 lines and reduction in the white arrow there on the side. You see that little bump on the surface? Well, the white arrow, the bump is gone. So what's the conclusion? Overall supplementation with AREDS 2 plus RPS for at least 4 months resulted in structural and/or visual improvements in approximately 70% of the patients. Now, the limitations of these case presentations are that the observations do not distinguish between the possibilities that the effect of the polyphenol preparation on retinal structure and function depend on synergistic interactions with AREDS 2, or if the polyphenols alone are responsible. Future randomized placebo-controlled clinical trials are warranted to confirm the beneficial effects of RPS alone and in combination with AREDS 2. But it's really interesting that this lady was taking the AREDS formulation for 5 years, and she had drusen and had the damage, took this formulation, took the RPS formulation for 9 months, and a dramatic difference. So the big difference is this is an all-natural formulation. As we said, it's 10 times more powerful than the resveratrol, and it does deliver a broad spectrum of over 15 polyphenols, including elagitannins, one of nature's most potent antioxidants, and it is patent pending exclusive to Shaklee. And as I pointed out, Roger Barnett tied up all of the commercial muscadine grape production for the next many decades. Actually, all we use is the skins and the seeds. So the producers can get the juice out and make their jelly or wine or whatever they do with it. And then all we do is take the skins and the seeds because the stuff that we want is there. So there you have it, folks. Feel younger longer, satisfaction guaranteed. And wow, that was fun. That was a quick run through. So I'm going to stop share and just see who is here. Oh my gosh, we got 61 people here. Okay, so much great information. Well, actually, I kind of do have a script. I have the transcription. I did a transcript of Dr. Daggy's talk. So I'm going to post that script. So let's see, I'm kind of scrolling through the chat. I love this product. I'll tell you a little story. About 10 years ago, I started to bike. I wanted to do the RAGBRAI, the Riders Great Bike Ride Across Iowa, the Register's Great Bike Ride Across Iowa. And it's the largest biking event actually outside of the Tour de France. There's over 20,000 people that ride it. And it's really funny because people are riding in crazy costumes and eating pork chops and all that stuff. It's not really taxing. You ride about 10 miles and hit a rest stop. I got a bike and I was riding back and forth to the meditation dome here and not really doing much. And so I just took a notion that one of my friends was going to ride it. And so I got a hold of Christina, who was a very good rider. And I said, Christina, you want to train me up a little bit? RAGBRAI is only 2 weeks away. And she said, well, okay, but you're going to have a sore butt and sore legs. And so we started writing, and she looked at me and said, "Are you sure you don't train?" And I go, "Yeah, I ride about 1.5 miles to the dome and back and around town." He said, "You shouldn't be able to do what you do." And then I started riding with a bike group, and these are guys who ride pretty seriously, 200 miles a week. And they said, "With what you ride, you shouldn't be able to do what you do." And I guess the joke was, is don't let Ferguson get a real bike. I had a kind of a heavier hybrid bike. So I'm pretty convinced that that capacity to generate power on the bike had something to do with all of those years, the 2 or 3 years that I had used. I think I was using Vivix for 2 years before that. So anyway, that's my little personal testimony, and a lot of stories and things that we really are not going to be talking about because they have to do with all kinds of disease states. We don't talk about that. We're not interested in disease. We're interested in health. And so we just talk about how this stuff makes us healthier and prepares our body properly for being healthy. So Susan Betcher. Oh, Susan, 100 miles in the heat in Tucson, Betcher says, "I definitely cycle faster and harder if I have my Vivix." Oh, before your ride. Okay, great. All right. So anyway, as I say, that's my story, and I think I'll stick to it. Thank you all very much for being on. We will talk with you later on. Take care. Bye-bye.